In my last devlog, I made some pretty bold claims about fixing sprint in my Halo-inspired sandbox shooter. And well, it looks like I still have some work to do. A lot of you pointed out the same thing. If there's no downside to sprint, what's the point? I need to turn sprint into a meaningful decision. And if I can't do that, well... you can't balance movement in a vacuum. It only makes sense once you've got real enemies, real weapons, and real combat pressures. So this month, I focused on building out a proper combat sandbox. New weapons, shields, and enemies. All so I can start stress testing sprint instead of guessing. So I started making some weapons. The pump-action shotgun was first. I wanted the same tension Halo had, deciding whether to commit to a full reload or fire what you've got. This gave me a chance to create different reloading logic for the weapon class. You have to load this gun shell by shell, and you can interrupt the reload to continue firing, which I think is important for such a close-range weapon. As long as you can get a single shell in there, you can keep firing. The weapon class can also shoot shotgun pellets as a projectile type now. All this is doing under the hood is spawning a specified number of bullets in a single frame. While I was testing this, I discovered that if you shot a physics object with the shotgun, it would go flying back way more than usual. Since the shotgun fires 12 pellets per shot, if all of them hit a physics object, you get a 12x impulse. So this meant that the shotgun ended up with this mechanic where you could use it to kick explosive barrels into enemies that were outside of the gun's effective range. This was a cool little discovery since I didn't actually write any code to make this mechanic. It's just an emergent behavior of the physics interface I've implemented into everything. Next up, I wanted to make something that was familiar to the melee weapons in Halo, but was designed to fit the sandbox of Exodus. I thought, well, swords and hammers have already been done, so how about an axe? A throwing axe, perhaps? I was thinking about God of War one day, and the idea came to me to make a throwable melee weapon that could return to you, much like your axe in God of War. The returning part would be easy. I already have kinesis. I don't need to make some unique return mechanic for the weapon. You just pull it in with kinesis like you'd do with anything else. So this seems like a pretty good fit for my sandbox. I made it behave more or less like Halo's energy sword. When you're close enough for the reticle to turn red, you can lunge at an enemy and it does enough damage to kill almost anything in one hit. So it's definitely a power weapon. The real fun comes from its alternate fire mode. If you hold the left trigger or the right mouse button, you'll ready the weapon for a throw. It does the same amount of damage as a melee strike would, so if you're accurate, you could drop an enemy in a single hit from a distance. It stays floating in the same spot where it hit, which makes it easier for the player to aim at the axe specifically and recall it with kinesis. But if you miss your shot, you might have a hard time finding it again, and now you're down to one weapon. So there's some real risk-reward going on there, especially in the middle of a fight. I kinda hated making this thing. Getting the existing weapon class to act as a throwable melee weapon was just not what this was originally built for, and I kinda suck at making melee animations as well. But that's why I'm doing this now, because it lets me build all this functionality early, as well as give me a chance to get some animation practice in. This axe took me about 3 or 4 days to get working, but making new weapons with similar traits will only take hours or even minutes to rapidly prototype. Finally, the plasma rifle. I wanted to make something that forces you to think about heat instead of just reloading like every other gun. The less heat there is to vent, the shorter the vent animation will be. So keep it cool between bursts, and you can fire more consistently than you could with a human weapon. Let it overheat and you'll get a 2x penalty to vent time. You could swap to another weapon while it vents though. Somewhere in between making all those weapons, I also gave the guns bullet magnetism. If you don't know what bullet magnetism is, it's a form of aim assist that subtly alters your aim direction to point towards enemies. This is why you can so easily get away with hip firing in Halo compared to other games, and it contributes a lot to that particular flavor of gunplay. So implementing this was very important to replicating that same feeling of being a hip-firing badass. While watching my friends play test builds, I noticed their aim was getting worse when they zoomed in, not better. So I made some tweaks to the ADS system. The biggest tweak was just removing ADS from like half of the guns. You don't need to aim a gun designed to spray and pray like a shotgun or an assault rifle. Then I lowered the camera sensitivity while aiming to help the guns like the prototype rifle that still use this system. Now I need something to shoot at. I took the Paragon Wraith character model from my asset library and turned it into the game's first enemy. This will be the foundation for all enemy behaviors and will eventually be used to build the Marine AI as well. So far I've only taught them how to shoot at the player, so it's very basic right now, but it paved the way for what I needed to do next. I needed to do an overhaul to the damage system. There are 3 types of damage now: shield damage, armor damage, and flesh damage. An enemy could have health bars for all 3 of these, maybe something like a shielded, armored, heavy unit. Others will only have 1 health bar, like a grunt. Your projectile will have stats for how much damage it will do to each of these categories, and they work in layers. So you have to deplete the shield health before you can do damage to the armor, and you'll have to shoot off the armor before you can do flesh damage to that area. What this means for the sandbox is that weapon choice actually matters. Plasma is great for stripping shields, but once they're down, you're better off switching to something that hits flesh harder. Anyway, while I was doing all that, I also added bullet bloom to the guns, updated the reticle system to reflect weapon traits and also turn red when you look at enemies. I made weapons and ammo drop from the test dummies when you kill them. Weapons eject persistent shells into the environment. Yes, persistent. Every bullet you fire will eject a shell that will remain in the world permanently, with no noticeable drop in FPS. There was a bug in the last version where you could use kinesis on a grenade you just threw. So I turned that into a feature. When you throw a grenade with kinesis, it will explode instantly upon impact, rather than 0.3 seconds after a bounce. I made a plasma shotgun just to see what it would be like. And finally, I made some improvements to the game's visuals. The biggest change was to the game's tone mapping, which allows me to have much cleaner color transitions in the highlights and shadows. This game will never have a realistic art style, but I want to do everything I can to make sure it has the cleanest, crispest, most readable art style possible. And this was a big step towards that. So, now I'm finally at a point where I can start testing solutions to my sprint problem. Following the suggestions made in the comments of the last video, your shields don't recharge while sprinting. You'll have to slow down and take cover to let your shields recharge. Now, if I leave it like this, you'll actually be punished for being too aggressive for too long. Eventually your shields will pop, and you'll be forced back into cover, which I wasn't really okay with. I like charging in and fucking shit up. So I've added a shield power-up. This has a chance to drop whenever a shielded enemy is killed. If you get close enough to one of these, your shields will instantly recharge. So this gives you a chance at staying in the fight for longer. You'll just have to kill one of the bigger shielded enemies to do it. If you can't find one of these power-ups, you'll still be forced into cover though, which will maintain that ebb and flow to combat where there are defensive moments and aggressive moments in a fight. I could also give the player a penalty to accuracy while sprinting, which would encourage a slower, more careful movement outside of sprint. But this is something I'll have to look at later when the combat has a bit more depth to it. But for now, it's already pretty fun. I want to close this video on something real. This game is my act of rebellion against creative stagnation, against the slow death of risk-taking, against being told to wait my turn while the same recycled crap gets repackaged and sold back to us every year. I started learning game development when I was 16 years old. I'm 29 now, and I'm done waiting for someone to hand me an opportunity. I'm going to make my own, and I'm willing to bleed for it. I put my house up for sale to fund this project. That's not a marketing stunt, that's a commitment. I'm betting everything on the idea that games still have new stories to tell, that they can still surprise us, that they can still be built with intention rather than relying on market research. And I'm betting there are people out there who feel the same way. I believe in the democratization of art, We need to start taking responsibility for our own zeitgeist, because who else will? Disney? EA? Ubisoft? No. If we don't fund and support the kinds of games we want to exist, they won't exist. It's that simple. The industry doesn't change because we complain about it. It changes because we build alternatives. That's what this is. I don't want this project shaped by someone looking at spreadsheets. I want it shaped by people who care whether this game actually feels good to play. That's why I'm launching a Patreon. If you back this project, you're not just donating. You're becoming part of the foundation that lets this game stay uncompromising. You'll get weekly updates, access to daily builds, and a front row seat to the entire process. The wins, the failures, and the iterations. I'm all in on this. If you believe games can be better, let's prove it.